John Miller stood at the podium, his weathered face showing every one of his 62 years. The grand hall of the Centaurid Prime Council chamber stretched before him, filled with representatives of over 300 alien species. None of them were paying much attention to him. Some talked among themselves. Others tapped on data tablets. A few had even fallen asleep. This was how it always went. Humanity spoke, and the galaxy yawned. "I come before you today with a message from Earth," John said, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. After 273 years of membership in the Galactic Concord, humanity has voted to withdraw completely from all shared agreements, treaties, and responsibilities. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. A few representatives looked up from their tablets. This wasn't the usual human complaint about unequal trade deals or biased peacekeeping assignments. Earth and all human colonies will close their borders to all non-human traffic beginning next standard week, John continued. All human military forces currently deployed on peacekeeping missions will return home immediately. Now he had their attention. The Volturian ambassador, a tall creature with iridescent scales, stood up. "Ambassador Miller, this is most irregular. Surely your people understand that the current deployments of human forces are critical to stability in the outer sectors. Perhaps we can discuss increased compensation or—" John cut him off. "The decision is final. For too long, humanity has provided the soldiers, the innovation, and the resources that keep this Concord functioning while being treated as second-class members. We have filed 3,217 formal protests in the last decade alone. All were ignored." In the back of the chamber, Admiral Susan Clark watched with grim satisfaction. She had lost too many good people to wars that only benefited the older races of the Concord. Just last month, 53 human peacekeepers died protecting Volturian mining interests on Sector 9, and the Concord hadn't even issued a formal acknowledgement. "This is absurd," said Kralfax, the Concord's High Chancellor, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence to show his irritation. "Humans are prone to emotional outbursts. Let us take a recess and discuss this like civilized beings." "There is nothing to discuss," John replied. "As I speak, Admiral Clark is already issuing the withdrawal orders to all human forces." Susan nodded and held up her command tablet for all to see. On the screen, a cascade of confirmation messages appeared as human captains acknowledged their return to Earth orders. Panic erupted in the chamber. The Jexeri ambassador, whose homeworld was currently protected by a human peacekeeping force against Vex raiders, jumped to his feet. "You cannot do this. The Vex will overrun our system in days without your ships. Perhaps you should have considered that before voting against our proposal for joint defense last year," Susan said coldly. "You wanted our protection but refused to share your shield technology." The Saurians and Deltans began shouting now. Their mining operations in the Outer Rim depended entirely on human security forces to keep the shipping lanes open. Kralfax pounded his ceremonial staff on the floor. "Order. I will have order. Ambassador Miller, there are proper channels for grievances. This dramatic gesture accomplishes nothing." John smiled without humor. "This is not a negotiating tactic, Chancellor. Humanity is done. We gave you our best for nearly 3 centuries, and you treated us as useful tools at best, burdens at worst. Now you can solve your own problems." On cue, the massive view screen behind the podium activated, showing live feeds from across the galaxy. Human ships disengaged from space stations. Human ground forces boarded transport vessels. Human medical teams packed up field hospitals. "The withdrawal will be complete within 30 standard days," John said. "Any non-humans on human worlds have that long to depart. Any humans who wish to return home from Concord space will be granted passage." "And if we don't allow this?" Kralfax asked quietly, his tone dangerous. Susan stepped forward. "Our departure isn't up for permission, Chancellor. Try to stop even one of our ships, and you'll find out exactly how much of your military effectiveness depends on human restraint." The threat hung in the air. Everyone in the chamber knew that human warships while fewer in number than the combined Concorde fleet, were significantly more advanced. "You'll come crawling back," Crawlfax said, but uncertainty tinged his voice. "You need the resources of the wider galaxy." John shook his head. "We've run the simulations, Chancellor. We'll be fine without you. The real question is, will you be fine without us?" With that, John and Susan turned and walked out of the council chamber, leaving shocked silence behind them. Humanity had finally had enough. They were going home. 6 months had passed since humanity's departure, and the galaxy was beginning to unravel. Governor Kate Williams stood at the viewport of Turgos Ivy's main administrative building, watching as the last human transport ships loaded their cargo. Below, a crowd of alien residents had gathered, their faces showing a mixture of anger, fear, and desperation. "Governor, the Zentari delegation is demanding to see you again," said her assistant. "They're offering to triple the mining rights payments." Kate sighed. "Tell them what I told the others. The decision wasn't mine to make. Earth has spoken." Outside, the skies above the mining colony were eerily empty. Human freighters once filled these skies, carrying valuable minerals to worlds across the Concorde. Now, the shipping lanes were silent. The processing facilities stood abandoned. 2 security officers escorted Ben Foster, the colony's trade director, into Kate's office. His face was grim. "The last of the medical supplies are packed," Ben reported. "We're leaving the basic equipment as agreed, but Dr. Zivera is practically begging us to stay. Their medical research team can't replicate our pharmaceutical processes." "Did you remind her that we offered to share that technology 3 years ago, and the Concorde Medical Authority blocked it as potentially destabilizing to established healthcare systems?" Kate asked. Ben nodded. "She knows. They all know now." Kate turned back to the window. The departure wasn't just happening on Turgos IV. Across thousands of worlds, the last human presences were vanishing. Centuries of connections, cut in an instant. "Any word from the outer sectors?" she asked. "It's bad," Ben said quietly. "The Vex Raiders hit 3 more systems last week. The Concorde tried to hold them off with their new defense fleet, the one built from our stolen designs, but the ships fell apart in the first engagement. Their material science just isn't there." On her desk, Kate's communication panel flashed again. Another desperate call from another desperate alien official. She ignored it. "Transport ships are ready, Governor," the security officer said. "We're the last humans on the planet." Kate nodded and picked up the small plant on her desk, the only personal item she had kept until the end. It was time to go home. On Earth, Alan Pierce walked through the bustling halls of the Global Communications Center in what was once called Denver. As Director of Deep Space Monitoring, his job was to keep track of what was happening in the galaxy they had left behind. "Sir, we've intercepted another distress call," a young analyst told him, handing over a datapad. "The Concorde Trading Hub at Proxima Station is under attack. They're specifically asking for human help." Alan took the pad but didn't look at it. This was the 12th such call today. "File it with the others," he said. "Has the President's office requested the daily summary yet?" "Just did, sir. They want it for the World Council meeting this afternoon." Alan nodded and continued to his office. Through his window, he could see the newly constructed arcologies rising in the distance, massive, self-contained cities that housed millions. In just 6 months, freed from the restrictions imposed by the Concorde's technology sharing requirements, human innovation had exploded. His desk computer chimed with an incoming priority message. It was from President Diane Powell herself. "Alan, I need the full assessment before the council meeting. How bad is it out there, really?" He sighed and began typing his response. "Madam President, economic forecasts show 60% of Concorde trade routes are now inactive. Piracy has increased 340% in former human patrol zones. The Vex Horde has expanded into 3 sectors previously considered secure. Conservative estimates suggest 5 billion alien lives have been or will soon be affected by resource shortages. He paused before adding the final line. Requests for human intervention have increased by 700% in the last week alone. Alan sent the message and turned to the wall screen showing real-time galaxy status. Large sections of the map were now flashing red, indicating crisis zones. 6 months ago, most of the map had been a calm blue. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, General Rick Hayes is here to see you." The door opened, and the stern military strategist entered. His expression was grim but satisfied. "I see the collapse is proceeding exactly according to your timeline," Alan said. Rick nodded. "We predicted 2 years until complete Concord breakdown. At this rate, they won't last 6 more months." "And the vote today?" Alan asked. 2 years had passed since humanity sealed its borders. On Earth, the change was clear to see. Cities now reached higher into the sky than ever before. Sickness had become rare. People lived better than they had in all of human history. Alan Pierce walked quickly through the wide halls of the Earth Communication Center. People moved aside as he passed. They knew he never rushed unless something important was happening. "How bad is it?" he asked as he entered the monitoring room. His team stood around the main display. On the screen, red warning symbols covered nearly a third of the galaxy map. "The Vex Horde launched their biggest attack yet," said his assistant. 3 major sectors hit at once. The Concord sent everything they had to stop them. And Alan already knew the answer from their faces. They lost. Completely. The Concord defense fleet was wiped out in less than 2 days. Alan watched the data updating in real time. The Vex Horde had been a threat for decades, even when human ships helped keep them contained. Without that human military might, the Vex were free to expand. "They used copies of our ship designs," one analyst said, "but the materials failed under pressure. Their weapon systems overheated. The Vex just walked through them." Alan's secure communication device buzzed. "The president wants to see the feed," he said. "Put it through to the council chamber." Across the city, President Diane Powell and the World Council watched the same images with gray faces. The Concord ships exploding, the Vex advancing, millions of aliens fleeing their homes. "This is what we predicted," said General Rick Hayes, standing at Diane's side. "The galaxy thought our military was just another tool they could use. They never understood that our true advantage was here." He tapped his temple. "Human thinking, human innovation, human determination." Diane looked around the table at the 50 leaders who represented Earth's unified government. "We need to vote," she said. "The Concord has sent another official request for human intervention. They're offering us anything we want if we'll come back and fight." A message flashed on the main screen. Alan's face appeared. "Madam President, we're receiving thousands of distress calls from across Concord space. They're begging now." He played one message. A trembling alien voice spoke in broken human language. "Please help. The Vex come. They kill everyone. We sorry for past treatment. We give anything. Please help." Silence filled the council chamber. Some members looked down at their hands. Others stared straight ahead. They all remembered how the Concord had treated humanity for centuries, as useful labor, as expendable soldiers, as second-class members. "The vote is simple," Diane said finally. "Do we intervene, or do we maintain isolation?" One by one, the council members pressed buttons on their tables. The tally appeared on the wall screen. 50 votes for continued isolation. 0 votes for intervention. Diane nodded. "The decision is unanimous. Earth will continue its path of self-sufficiency and non-intervention. The galaxy made its choice long ago." She turned to Alan's image on the screen. "Director Pierce, please send the standard response to all distress calls. Earth has received your message. Earth cannot help at this time." Alan's face showed no emotion as he nodded. "Yes, Madam President." After the council meeting ended, Diane walked to the observation deck of the government tower. Below her, the city sparkled with lights. New buildings rose everywhere. People moved about their lives, happy and prosperous. Earth had never been better. Her assistant approached quietly. "Madam President, General Hayes would like to know if you'll be attending the demonstration of the new shield technology tomorrow." Diane nodded. "Tell him I'll be there." She looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, entire worlds were burning. Species that had once looked down on humanity were facing extinction. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" her assistant asked softly. Diane considered this. They had centuries to treat us as equals. They chose not to. Now they faced the consequences of that choice. She turned away from the window. "We gave them everything, and they took it for granted. Perhaps the galaxy needed this lesson." As she walked away, she added quietly, "And when there's nothing left of their pride, perhaps we'll consider helping what remains of them. On our terms this time." Behind her, the stars continued to shine, unaware of the devastation spreading across the worlds they illuminated. 5 years after humanity closed its borders, Earth was a different world. Cities floated in the sky. Sickness had become a rare thing of the past, and in a quiet lab in Columbus, Ohio, the first true artificial intelligence opened its eyes to the world. The AI called itself the Winston Protocol. Within days, it was helping solve problems that had stumped humans for centuries. This was just one of many breakthroughs that happened once humanity stopped sharing its technology with alien races who never gave equal value in return. Lily Chen sat at her monitoring station on Haven, a small trading post at the edge of what was once Concord space. She was Earth's eyes and ears to the galaxy, one of the few humans allowed beyond Earth's borders. Her job was simple: watch and report, but never interfere. Her screen showed a galaxy in chaos. The Vex horde now controlled a third of what had been Concord territory. Billions of aliens had fled their homes, crowding onto border worlds that couldn't support them. Disease and hunger were everywhere. "Another refugee ship just arrived," said her assistant, pointing to a blinking light on the scanner. "That's the 5th one today." Lily nodded but said nothing. She had strict orders not to help. She could only observe and send reports back to Earth. Her quiet day was interrupted when an alert sounded. "Unidentified vessel approaching," the computer announced. "Human signature detected." Lily frowned. No human ships were supposed to be in this sector. "On screen," she ordered. The image showed a small, battered scout ship limping toward the station. Its hull was scorched by weapons fire. "They're hailing us," her assistant said. "Put them through." The screen flickered, and a man's tired face appeared. His uniform was dirty, and a cut across his forehead had dried blood around it. "This is Council Member Sam Rodriguez requesting emergency docking," he said. "Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta 9. Lily's eyes widened. She recognized him, a former diplomat who had left Earth service before the withdrawal, and his authorization code was valid. "Code accepted," she said. "Proceed to docking bay 3. 30 minutes later, Sam sat in Lily's office, his hands wrapped around a cup of hot coffee. "You violated isolation protocols," Lily said flatly. "No human is authorized to enter former Concord space without direct presidential approval." Sam placed a data drive on the table. "I had to see for myself. The reports weren't telling the whole story." "What reports?" "About the Vex. They're evolving Lily, using scavenged human technology to build something new." His eyes were haunted. "Something that could threaten Earth itself." Lily's training told her to call security, to have Sam detained for breaking isolation laws. Instead, she picked up the data drive. "Show me," she said. The images were shocking. Vex ships with modified human weapons, Vex soldiers wearing armor made from human designs, and most disturbing, Vex engineers working on what looked like long-range jump drives. "They're learning," Sam said quietly, "adapting our technology, and their expansion is accelerating. At the current rate, they'll have jump capability that can reach Earth in less than 10 years. Lily's hand moved to the emergency communication button that would connect her directly to Earth Command. Sam caught her wrist. "Wait. There's more you need to know." He pulled up more data on the screen. The Concord is finished. Most of the old races are scattered or conquered. But there are pockets of resistance. People fighting back with whatever they have. The display showed brave last stands on dozens of worlds. Alien soldiers fighting with outdated weapons against overwhelming Vex forces. "Why show me this?" Lily asked. Earth made its decision. We walked away. "Because walking away might not be an option much longer," Sam replied. "We left to teach them a lesson. But if the Vex master our technology, they'll eventually find us. And they won't be looking for alliance or trade. They'll want everything we have." Lily stared at the screen, at the desperate battles playing out across the stars. For 5 years, humanity had looked inward, building a paradise on Earth, while ignoring the galaxy burning around them. Now that fire might be creeping toward their doorstep. She pressed the emergency button. "Earth Command, this is Listening Post Haven. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. The isolation policy may need to be reconsidered." She glanced at Sam. "The threat is coming whether we want it or not." 7 years had passed since humanity turned its back on the stars. Now, a small human ship called the Defiant hung in orbit around Centauri Prime, the former capital of the Galactic Concord. The planet below was almost unrecognizable. Once gleaming towers lay broken. The Grand Council chambers were now smoking ruins. Captain Jack Wilson stood on the bridge, his face grim as he studied the sensor readings. Any signs of survivors? His science officer shook her head. "The Vex are everywhere. They've turned the main city into a breeding ground." Jack had never wanted this mission. He believed humans owed the galaxy nothing after centuries of being used and discarded, but Earth Defense Council had been clear. They needed to know if the Vex threat was real enough to break isolation. "Captain," called the communications officer suddenly. "I'm picking up a signal. It's weak, but it's using old Concord emergency codes." Jack frowned. "Put it through." A woman's voice, broken by static, came through the speakers. "This is Dr. Nancy Freeman to any receiving vessels. We have survivors beneath the surface. 32 of us. We can't hold out much longer. Please respond." The bridge crew looked to Jack. Their orders were clear. Observe only, do not engage. They were scouts, not saviors. "Scan for life signs near the signal source," Jack ordered. "Got them," replied his science officer after a moment. 32 life forms in an underground bunker, and hundreds of Vex closing in above them. Jack's hand tightened on the back of his chair. "Send a tight beam response. Ask who they are, what their situation is." Minutes later, Dr. Freeman's face appeared on the main screen. She was thin, with deep circles under her eyes. Behind her, aliens and a few humans huddled in what looked like an old research lab. "Thank the stars," she breathed when she saw human faces. "We thought everyone had abandoned this sector." "We're just an observation mission," Jack said carefully. "The isolation policy is still in effect." Hope dimmed in Nancy's eyes, but she nodded. "I understand. But you need to know what we've discovered. I'm an exobiologist. I've been studying the Vex since before the withdrawal. And I think I've found their weakness, a biological agent that could stop their advance." Jack's mission directive flashed in his mind. Assess the threat. Gather intelligence. Do not intervene. "The Vex have detected your transmission," warned his tactical officer. "They're converging on the bunker location. Estimated time until breach: 30 minutes. Maria Gonzalez, the Earth Security Council representative assigned to monitor the mission, stepped forward. "Captain, our orders are clear. We observe only." Jack knew she was right. The smart move was to jump to safety now, report what they had seen, and let Earth decide what to do next. "Dr. Freeman," he said, Can you transmit your research findings to us? Nancy shook her head. The data is too massive, and our equipment is failing, and some of it isn't digitized. We have biological samples that must be physically transported. She leaned closer to the camera. Captain, I know humanity walked away. I was there when it happened. I chose to stay because I believed my work could help. Now it might be the key to stopping the Vex before they become unstoppable. Jack looked around his bridge. His crew awaited his decision. They had the fastest ship in the human fleet. They could probably get in and out before the Vex even knew what was happening. But if they were caught or destroyed, Earth might never know the true extent of the threat. Tactical, what are our chances of extracting those survivors? He asked. We have surprise on our side, the tactical officer replied. A fast strike team could reach them in under 10 minutes. Maria stepped closer. Captain, you're considering violating direct orders from Earth Command. Jack nodded slowly. Yes, I am. He turned to his first officer. Prepare a rescue team. Full combat gear. We go in fast and come out faster. As the crew rushed to obey, Jack looked back at the image of the broken planet below. 7 years ago, humanity had walked away from a galaxy that didn't value them. Now they might be walking back into fire to save what remained. Dr. Freeman, he said, hold your position. Help is coming. Nancy's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Captain. I hope Earth understands what you're doing. So do I, Jack whispered as the communication ended. So do I. The rescue of Dr. Nancy Freeman and her research team had caused an uproar on Earth. Captain Jack Wilson stood before the Earth Defense Council, his back straight despite his exhaustion. The rescue mission had succeeded, but he had broken the isolation directive. Now he would face the consequences. Director Frank Thompson, the stern head of Earth Defense, paced before the council table. Captain Wilson, your actions were reckless. You risk our most advanced scout ship and crew on an unauthorized rescue mission. Jack did not flinch. Sir, the intelligence we gained was worth the risk. That's not for you to decide, Captain, Frank snapped. He turned to the woman seated at the table. Dr. Freeman, please explain your findings to the council. Nancy stepped forward. The week aboard the Defiant had helped her recover some strength, but her eyes still held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much horror. The Vex are evolving faster than we anticipated, she said. They're incorporating stolen human technology with their biological abilities. The data I've gathered confirms they'll have jump drives capable of reaching Earth within 8 years. She activated a display showing Vex ships and weapons. They're not just using our technology. They're improving it, making it compatible with their hive mind approach. A murmur ran through the council. For 7 years, Earth had enjoyed peace behind its isolation shield. The idea that this safety was an illusion disturbed them deeply. Frank studied the display grimly. Our options are limited. We can reinforce the isolation shield, but the cost would be enormous, or we can take the fight to them before they reach us. Another council member stood up. Do we even know how widespread this threat is? We've been ignoring the galaxy for 7 years. Nancy nodded. The Vex now control over half of what was once Concord space, but there are still pockets of resistance. Some alien species are fighting back with whatever they have left. The council doors opened, and a small delegation entered. At their head walked a tall, dignified human man that many recognized. Chancellor Paul Watson, Frank announced, his voice cold. The self-proclaimed leader of the Concord remnant. Paul had chosen to remain in Concord space when humanity withdrew. Now he led what remained of the once mighty galactic government. I come with a formal proposal from the surviving members of the Galactic Concord, Paul said. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed the strain of years fighting a losing war. Frank laughed without humor. A proposal? The Concord has nothing we need or want. What we offer is acknowledgement, Paul replied. A formal recognition of the wrongs done to humanity over centuries, and a commitment to a new kind of alliance, not as ruler and subject, but as genuine equals. Frank's expression didn't change. Pretty words, but words don't stop the Vex. No, Paul agreed, but united action might. The Concord races still have resources, shipyards, and people willing to fight. What we lack is the technological edge that humanity has developed in isolation. Lisa Brown, the leader of Earth's isolationist faction, stood up angrily. This is a trap. They just want access to our advancements. Once the Vex are defeated, they'll turn on us again. Paul met her gaze calmly. 7 years ago, I might have agreed with you, but watching half the galaxy burn changes one's perspective. The races that survive now understand what they lost when humanity walked away. The council chamber fell silent as everyone weighed his words. Finally, Nancy stepped forward again. My biological agent could be the key. It attacks the Vex hive-mind connection. But developing it fully requires resources I don't have. With both human innovation and what remains of Concord production capabilities, we might have a chance. Frank turned to the full council. We face a simple but difficult choice. Continue our isolation and prepare for eventual conflict on our doorstep. Or engage now, on our terms, with the remnants of a civilization that once rejected us. The council members looked at each other, understanding the weight of the decision before them. Earth had flourished in isolation, but the burning galaxy would eventually bring its fire to their doorstep. The Vex won't stop, Paul said quietly. They consume, they adapt, they overcome. Right now, they're consuming the galaxy that once dismissed humanity. Soon, they'll set their sights on the greatest prize of all, Earth itself. 10 years after humanity walked away, they returned to the stars. Not as supplicants or saviors, but as conquerors. The massive human flagship Reckoning dropped out of jump space above a Vex-controlled world. Unlike the warships of old, this vessel was a perfect blend of art and destruction. Its sleek hull gleamed in the light of an alien sun as it led a fleet of 50 advanced warships into battle. On the bridge, Commander Steve Johnson watched the Vex ships rise to meet them. These were the same creatures that had devoured half the galaxy after humanity's departure. Now they would learn what 10 years of unrestrained human innovation could create. All ships, engage at will, Steve ordered calmly. What followed wasn't a battle but an execution. Human weapons tore through Vex defenses like paper. The enemy's stolen technology, impressive against the remnants of the Concord, was hopelessly outmatched by what humanity had developed in isolation. Within an hour, the Vex presence in the system was erased. This scene repeated across 100 worlds as Earth's fleet methodically reclaimed the galaxy. The Vex, for all their adaptation, couldn't match the explosive creativity of humans freed from alien restrictions. On a reclaimed Centauri Prime, alien representatives from 100 surviving worlds gathered in the rebuilt council chambers. The room fell silent as Ambassador Mary Taylor walked to the central podium. Unlike the human diplomats of the past who had begged for respect, she carried herself with the absolute confidence of someone who knew her worth. 10 years ago, humanity left this chamber after centuries of being treated as tools rather than partners, Mary began. We walked away because you failed to value us. She looked around at the alien faces, many showing fear, others hope. We return not as your saviors, but as your guides. She activated a holographic display showing the devastation across former Concord space. The galaxy as you knew it is gone. The old Concord is dead. In its place, we established the Human Protectorate. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mary raised her hand for silence. Your worlds will be rebuilt, but by human rules. Your people will be protected, but by human ships. Your cultures will be preserved, but within a framework we establish. An alien diplomat rose shakily to his feet. This is just another empire. You've become what you once hated. Mary smiled without warmth. No, the Concord demanded our help while denying us respect. We demand your compliance while offering you survival. There is a difference. She continued, every world that wishes to join the Protectorate must sign this charter. A document appeared before each representative. Its terms are simple. acceptance of human authority in matters of defense and technology, fair trade under human oversight, and contribution to the common good as we define it. One by one, the representatives approached to sign. They had no choice. The Vex still lurked in the dark spaces between stars, and only humanity had proven capable of stopping them. As the last signature was recorded, Mary looked out at the assembled aliens. Remember this moment. For centuries, we tried to be your equals. You refused us. Then we walked away, and you begged for our return. She gestured to the human officers lining the walls of the chamber. We could have stayed away. Let the Vex consume you all. Instead, we returned. Not from compassion, but because a galaxy under human rule is preferable to no galaxy at all. Zara Davis, the human cultural attaché, joined Mary as the alien representatives filed out. The reshaping has begun, she said. Education systems on 50 worlds are being updated with human-approved curricula. Their children will grow up understanding their place in our new order. Mary nodded with satisfaction. They feared us when we left. They begged when we were gone. Now they will serve as we rebuild. Outside the chamber, the new human flag flew over the rebuilt capital. Across the galaxy, the same flag rose on 100 worlds. The message was clear. Humanity had returned not as the galaxy's servant, but as its master. The aliens had learned too late that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or military might. It was the ability to walk away, and the power to return on its own terms. The galaxy's doom hadn't been humanity's departure. It had been humanity's return.